Sensory processing is not a term exclusive to any one group of people. All people of all ages process sensory input on a daily basis as a factor in human behavior. The delineation arises as it relates to the intensity by which people process sensory input. Dunn, 2007. Currently, there is an abundant surge of information being generated on the topic of sensory processing disorder, SPD, comorbid existence in the lives of children with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, Dunn, 2007. Recent estimates indicate that as many as 10% of general education students have sensory processing disorders, Riley, 2009, and 80% of children with ASD also have sensory processing disorders, Smith, 2015. The link between the two diagnoses was recently added to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, DSM-5, American Psychiatric Association, 2013. According to the DSM-5, children with sensory processing disorder can exhibit sensory reactions that range between the thresholds of sensory hyperreactivity and sensory hyporeactivity, Smith, 2015. There are an array of responsive behaviors linked to the thresholds of SPD in children with ASD. In describing sensory processing disorder behaviors, researchers reference sensory sensitivity, sensory under-responsivity, and sensory-seeking activities, Lane, 2009. These descriptors describing the functions of behaviors seen in children with SPD are among the few points that researchers seem to agree upon, which may account for the use of sensory processing interventions for as many as 60% of children with ASD, Smith, 2015. SPD is often assessed in children by occupational therapists to reveal the intense differences between how children with ASD process sensory information in comparison to their neurotypical peers, Houston, 2010. Intervention is believed necessary when a child exhibits stereotypical and repetitive behaviors that interfere with their participation and performance in day-to-day living, Houston, 2007. These behaviors are referred to as multifunctional and can be motivated by desires to gain attention, reduce anxiety, attain something tangible, or even to escape, Houston, 2010. Judson and Bundy suggest that the above main behaviors were described as flapping of arms and rocking rather than completing assigned task, avoiding social interactions, finger posturing, and more self-stimulatory repetitive movement patterns. These behaviors are most unilaterally described among researchers as exhibits of behavior due to hyperreactivity or hyporeactivity, both of which are commonly referred to in connection with Dunn's model of sensory processing, Dunn, 2007. Dunn's research is widely sourced for describing the correlation between a person's ability to self-regulate and the functioning of their nervous system operations. Researchers also agree that sensory processing function adheres to 4 basic patterns of operation, Dunn, 2007. Dunn's research included those with SPD along with those who did not have specific disabilities. The research also suggests that there are threshold continuums for processing sensory information. For the purpose of her research, thresholds were defined as the levels by which a nerve cell or system receives the amount of input necessary to cause its activation. The continuum was described in terms of lows and highs and can be experienced across the senses at the same time. Dunn's research is best visualized as a 4-quadrant model. One axis is labeled threshold and the other is labeled behavioral response. The 4 quadrants are labeled sensory seeking, sensory sensitivity, low registration, and sensory avoiding. The child's response to specific stimuli determines their location on the model, Judson, 2010. Having a low sensory threshold, hyperreactive, was described as a person who tolerates less sensory input, thereby becoming reactive more rapidly than a person with a high sensory, hyporeactive, who, although uncomfortable and possibly even anxiety-filled, is able to remain in a situation with less responsiveness. Smith, 2015. Both types are believed to experience more intense patterns of sensory processing than their neurotypical peers. Dunn, 2007. Dunn's research further describes the importance of self-regulation as a continuum that governs behavior. The continuum reflects the ability of the child with ASD to utilize strategies ranging from passive to active reactions. The passive child may not make attempts to escape an uncomfortable sensory experience, whereas the child who acts out due to uncomfortable sensory experiences is said to be responding actively. 2010. In either case, behaviors surrounding hyperreactivity and or those surrounding hyporeactivity are debates that question the efficacy of interventions in a climate of incongruent research patterns and the complexities of ASD among individuals. Lane, 2009. A vast sea of research exists in reference to SPD in students with ASD, and while the characteristics of those affected is generally agreed upon, there is a major disconnect among researchers as to what aspects of SPD or ASD should be examined, resulting in a lack of empirical evidence to substantiate research findings. Dovid 18-13. Challenges exist in research regarding SPD due to the dissimilar features in research targets, varying topics, control group differences, and sample sizes. Comparing studies is further convoluted by the innate differences of individuals with ASD as it pertains to how their spectrum of differences affects behavior. Lane, 2009. A common thread in the research reviewed was the use of sensory integration therapy, SIT, and sensory-based interventions, SBI. SIT takes place within a clinic-based setting and involves purposeful challenging of a child's motor planning and sensory processing system in order to evoke the response. Smith, 2015. Research suggests that neurological processes that are stimulated by sensory-rich input show improvement in integrating sensory information. Barton, 2014. A traditional SIT setting is equipped with items such as swings, therapy balls, walls for climbing, trampolines, and inner tubes. The program's fidelity hinges on proper stimulation of the child's proprioceptive and vestibular systems. Proprioceptive involves the input into the joints, and vestibular involves balance and knowing where one is in space. An individualized program design and 10 essential elements that range from ensuring safety, actively stimulating the senses, and establishing a therapeutic alliance during child-centered play. SBI also utilizes purposeful sensory system stimulation, but does so outside of the confines of a clinical setting. SBIs are designed to be integrated into the child's daily routine in an effort to support the child in behavioral regulation, quite often to de-escalate the child from an agitated, overstimulated state. Smith, 2015. SBI intervention utilized materials such as brushes, weighted or pressure vests, and therapy balls. Barron, 2014. Although SITs and SBIs are structured, widely utilized interventions, variances across research prevents the research from being empirically sound, leading many researchers to discount and reject its efficacy. The research designs are said to be weak, non-conclusive, and possess high exposure to researcher bias. Barton, 2014. The goal of the research conducted by Smith, 2014, was to determine the efficacy of SIT and SBI interventions for students with ASD on behavior and the ability to self-regulate based on a comprehensive review of available research. SIT and SBIs are generally single subject research designs, and are highly impacted by the individuality of the subject, Smith 2015. The interventions differ in that SBIs are adult-centered, which can render rapid behavioral changes, but may not generalize across people and various settings, Smith 2015. SBI SITs, differ in that they are generally child-centered designs in more controlled clinical environments. Smith, 2015. Smith purports that the research findings lean towards more efficacy with SIT interventions due to the enhanced sensory situations, one-on-one treatments, and the play-based sessions. Similarly, an additional comparative study of research findings support the inadequacies and limited evidence for the benefit for SBIs and the growing positive evidence of the effectiveness of SIT interventions. To be thorough, less formal but widely discussed research designs concerning therapy balls and therapy cushions were reviewed and compared for efficacy due to their high use in classroom settings. Interventions that investigated the effectiveness of therapy cushions, Umida and Dietz 2011, and therapy balls, Bagatelle 2010, Interventions that investigate the effectiveness of therapy cushions, Umida Dietz 2011, and therapy ball chairs, Bagatelle 2010, on in-seat and on-task behaviors, were implemented in classroom settings for students with ASD. The studies targeted the same behavior, but in line with previously discussed research designs, the studies utilized different intervention techniques. Sample sizes included less than 10 people per study, and no significant change in behavior was documented. Umida Dietz 2011, Bagatelle 2010. Although the research has been deemed empirically inconclusive, children who are identified as having issues with sensory input processing are permitted to obtain sensory integration therapy in the private and public school setting by an occupational therapist, Rowley 2009. If sensory processing issues are deemed a hindrance to the acquisition of a student's education, their ability to participate in school activities, or to behave adaptively, federal law will support supportive interventions from a licensed occupational therapist as a related service under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act of 2004, Raleigh 2009. Dunn's research, 2007, suggests that when parents and caregivers understand that the sensory processing needs of their children, routines can be created that support successful participation in life's events.